Hello, and welcome to another episode of Architecture for Kids podcast. I'm your host, Antonio Capelão. I'm a trained architect, an architectural educator, and founding director of award-winning Architecture for Kids CIC. In this podcast, I'm going to talk to practitioners and creatives that share the same passion as I do, to inspire and to engage children and young people to shape their built environment and the creative industries. The podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the Built Environment Trust, the Thornton Education Trust, and the Welsh School of Architecture, Cardiff University. My guest today is Alex Raher. Alex is an architect and co-founder of Delve Architects, who specialize designing educational spaces that are playful, fun, and engaging to learn in. He has worked across the UK delivering a range of educational, residential, and community projects, and has a specialism in designing sustainable, low-carbon nurseries. As co-founder of Delve, Alex leads on projects at multiple scales, from smaller public arts projects, new build schools, retrofit of listed buildings, and large-scale school master planning. Alex, thank you for coming to talk to me today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Hi, Antonio.
What subjects were you good at school, and what subject did you enjoy most at school, if they were different?
My favourite subjects through school were art, math, probably, languages, and actually music too. I enjoyed quite a range of studies at school, and I quite enjoyed the breadth that gave you from an educational point of view. And I think my most enjoyable subject was probably linguistics, understanding about different cultures and experiencing how people live in different countries and different environments. But yeah, probably a key focus was art and mathematics, and that's what I guess developed my interest in my next career in studies.
When did you realize you wanted to be an architect, and how were you supported?
Probably through studying art, I guess, and that was my first initial introduction to architecture and the built environment. Living so close to London also was a big inspiration. I naturally thought that an interest in mathematics and art lent itself towards a career in the construction industry and the built environment. That sort of evolved into seeing what architecture can bring and how architects work with people, how we problem solve and use that creative side of our brain as well. From a support, I guess it was an interesting career because no one in my family has ever studied or been an architect. Actually, my family have been involved in education. My mum and sister are both teachers, so I was involved from quite an early age in the educational world. I probably was one of the first things that catalysed my interest in architecture and education together.
Do you want to talk about Delve Architects and how they came to be focus in educational projects?
Delve was founded in 2017 by myself and my business partner, Martin. We both actually grew up together in Buckinghamshire, just outside London, and we would also studied at school and had the sort of art interest and art classes together. So I think that was the catalyst, those early conversations when we were 15, 16 about being architects and even discussing starting to practice together. It's been on our minds for many years and got to a point when we both trained and qualified and worked elsewhere, where we decided we wanted to take a leap, I guess, and start a practice, both having a strong interest in education. And one of the first projects we completed together was a school project in Buckinghamshire called the Little Hall. It was a new build school dining facility for a primary school, and that was introduced through the government initiative to bring hot school food and dinners to all children under a certain age. So the school needed to expand and build a new facility. So we worked on that together, and it was really successful. I guess it kind of catalyzed and made us realize that we could work together, and that we both had a real passion for educational design, and that project really started Delve. And from there we've moved forward, and we're now a practice of 10 working from London Bridge. But that is probably those early conversations as school friends, to be honest, about what we thought we wanted to do in the future, and we realised it sort of 10, 15 years later.
You do a lot of design work for nursery school. Is there a particular project that you want to talk about, how that design process takes place?
Our key niche, I guess, that we work in is early years education. So we delivered a lot of nursery schools and early years nurseries across London and England. And we found that a lot of the projects tend to be fit out of shell spaces. So we're actually looking at former commercial units, warehouses, and former doctor surgeries, even pubs that have fallen into disrepair or are underused and are being converted into educational facilities. We sort of take these shell units and look at internal fit out, but from an educational standpoint, and we work quite closely with the nursery schools to understand how they operate, how they use the space, things like safeguarding, obviously materiality, sustainability. We quite carefully understand how children use a nursery, how they play, how they learn, and we're really passionate about that. So, yeah, I think in terms of a particular project, there's maybe a few that come to mind. One that we've recently completed over in Romford in East London was the fit out of about a 5,000 square foot for warehouse. It was an industrial space, completely unused. So it took it back to shell and brought quite a sort of material and nature-led sustainable approach to the fit out, where we avoided any plasterboard and we used timber walls throughout, lots of glazing. We tried to drop the heights of everything down so that the sidelines across the floor plan were designed with the mind of a 2 or 3 year old, or with the sort of average height of a young person in mind. One of the other key concepts was the way we looked at how children use space and how they interact with space. And often you can find a circulation for children that happens in circles or in a circular movement. They like to explore in quite an organic and natural way. So we removed all corridors from the floor plan. It's quite a simple rectangular floor plan. So what we did is classrooms around the perimeter with a central core, which acts as an adaptable dining, performance, and multi-use of flexible space. And every space leads out from that central part of the plan. And that was quite a key concept. So removing corridors and removing long, dark circulation routes and allowing a bit more free flow, that's been really successful, and it allowed us a bit more flexibility in how a nursery operates and the kind of age range they can take and the way that the children use the space in a daily basis.
This knowledge that you just talked about, is it precedence or do you do case studies?
It's led through engagement with the client. Sometimes we've been out to see former nurseries or current nurseries that they have, spent some time, 3 or 4 hours just in the space, watching how children interact with each other, with the built environment, with the space itself. And that informs some of our design decisions, but we're also quite careful not to be too prescriptive in what we put into the space. I think it's really important to allow children to adapt and use space in the way they see fit rather than the way an adult sees it. And you might think as a designer you're creating something for a child, but actually the way the child uses that space is very different. We have to be quite careful in that sense. There's a really interesting video from something that comes to mind, Assemble's video for the Venice Biennale in 2017, I think. It's just about play and how children play in the city, how children play in playgrounds, and what provision we make for how children can play in an environment. And it's called The Voices of Children. I think it's really important to think that way, and it translates from that early years design. Nurseries is such an important level of childhood and education, but all the way through up to how children use the city and the space we give to children, how they use it. So yeah, we do research, how children are perceived and how the space are perceived by young people, but we try and be quite organically led by that. And I guess it's sometimes a bit more about what you don't put in a space than what you do, to allow them a bit more freedom to explore.
In Finland, play becoming so important, in nurseries, being pedagogy is so important in the early years. How does your design cater for that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think there's a lot of research across some of the Scandinavian countries, and also there's other places like the way the Japanese also look at nursery schools and education. There's an amazing example of Japanese nursery school, which is circular and has a rooftop kind of garden playground space where the children actually, they do run in circles and they use the space in a circular form. And they've actually managed to create a completely open plan floor plate internally which you would think would become acoustically really difficult, would allow too much cross movement between different classes and different age ranges. But actually, they've found that it's really successful. Children are like to stay in the zone that they know. They understand where their peers are and where their friends are, and the kind of zoning of their class. So I think it's interesting to look at things like that in a way as an architect, how we might try and define spatial order and what would be traditionally thought of as a classroom space, or how children should play or use spaces. And I think actually you can flip it on the head quite a lot and think conversely about, if you were a child, what would you want and how would you want to use a space? And I think it's really difficult to do that as an adult, because we're so conditioned to think in a certain way, and I think it's almost impossible to keep that childhood way of imagination and play and sort of predefined conceptions of the world. When children play, it's very present, it's very in the moment, and I think as an adult, we've kind of lost that. We like to think that we can think in that way, but realistically, we can't. So from our side, I guess to answer maybe the question about how we design, we're very much led by the client as well, because the specific location and type of building we're working on varies obviously between each site. At the moment, we're doing some interesting work on some new build nurseries with actually some intergenerational care, working with elderly people and young people, and seeing how sort of symbiosis of those relationships are really intriguing. There's a lot of research about that. But other projects have been things like converted Victorian houses turned into nurseries over 4 or 5 levels, and that brings its own challenges with how children use the space. So I think it's unique on a site-by-site basis, but we are informed by sort of wider research.
I'm really interested in this intergenerational aspect that you just talked about. And do you involve the little toddlers into the design process? And if you do, how does that work?
We do, and we have held workshops with young people, and we've created booklets, design your own nursery. We've had feedback from existing nurseries who are looking to expand it to larger units or new units, and had some amazing ideas. And I guess it's quite difficult from an early age, from 1 and 2. That's not really you can't quite get the engagement you might get from a primary school student, 6, 7, 8, 9. But the toddlers, the sort of preschoolers at 3 and 4, 4 and a half, are really aware, I think, of the environment they're in, and they're really, really astute to what you're bringing. So we have done that. At times it's been through physically being in the space and talking to toddlers rather than actually getting written feedback. But we have also had some really amazing little sketches, and we do evolve them. We are working with some older students and some SEND schools as well. So we're doing a slightly different approach with that. When you've got children of obviously an older age, you can do a bit more engagement on that. I think that's a really interesting point to touch on as well, is how much we do listen to young people and teenagers. And there was a really interesting statistic from one of your earlier podcasts, a lady who was the architect of the Great Ormond Hospital, about 25% of Londoners being under 18. I was quite astounded by that. A quarter of the population of London is under 18, and generally I think that's quite an underrepresented group. If you think how do people of that age actually have a voice, and how do they get heard? I think it's really important that we think a bit more about how we listen to teenagers and young people about what they need and what they want, rather than sort of prescribing what they need and telling them how to learn and what they need to learn and kind of what career they have to take on. It's such an amazing part of your life, being an early child and teenager. I think you need to allow a bit more freedom to explore what's possible. So that's probably a slight diversification, but and then touching on the intergenerational care, it's fascinating. We've started working with an amazing client in the north of England who are actually providing care home provision in synergy with early years care, and they've decided to create this relationship between the elderly and the young people of the community. And one of their key approaches to this is that care homes shouldn't be seen as something completely separate to society and shouldn't be seen as this individual element where elderly people go to be, just cared for and not seen. They see it as a real community and part of the development. It's a really pioneering approach to how beneficial early years can be to people who are very elderly, and on the converse, how beneficial elderly people can be to young people. And I think you can see it through the relationship of children with their grandparents. It's lovely, really. And they already have a few sites, and they see how operationally it works successfully. They hold workshops, they do art classes, therapy. The children recognise the elderly people on the site, and equally it works the other way around. And you get these spontaneous interactions that children have with adults that adults don't really give to other adults because they're too, maybe too deep in their ideas of, or no one really judges an elderly person. A child doesn't judge an elderly person like maybe an adult might. So it's fascinating, and we're also looking spatially how we arrange these nurseries, whether they're integrated with care homes, if they're separate, maybe they're new build properties, and also in particular looking at the external space and how the play element of these nurseries interacts with the care home. So there's some intriguing design ideas about allotments and nature, bird watching, forest schools, the idea of play being a bit more integrated into the natural environment. And I think there's also a real synergy between how elderly people can help teach younger people about things like growing food and, their experience of the world. So it's a really interesting thing.
The way you were talking, I was thinking about my parents and their grandchildren, and then as well as when my mom got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, the thing that Toby used to relax her was actually holding a doll. She carried around this doll for almost until she died. It'd be really interesting to see the progress of the work.
Yes, the Alzheimer's discussion and dementia care. We are doing a little bit of work with a charity down in the New Forest. This again, amazing charity called Spudworks, who do arts and community engagement projects for sort of architecture and education linked together, and how community work can, I guess, help people experience architecture and arts together. But one of the projects we've been working with them on is the pavilion for dementia care, and there's just lovely sort of research about how to help people suffering with Alzheimer's or dementia, and the kind of spaces you can create, and the calmness and the almost the home from home aspect, and again that synergy with how young people can help alleviate that as well is amazing. So we're really, really inspired by a lot of that.
As you were speaking, I was thinking about modernism and an exhibition I just saw at Riba. Our modernism is kind of not really pay attention to children, and you talked about agency for children. How do you think we're going to go about to make that happen?
In modernism, and I guess giving space to children is really interesting. I think that comes from probably the commercialization of space of the city, and I guess unfortunately when you're doing something in a city, usually it's a commercial act, and often there's not that kind of space between just to experience the urban environment in a really free way. And that probably is where playgrounds come in, really. Playgrounds, adventure playgrounds, and set spaces for children to play are really a byproduct of the fact that we've created cities that aren't safe for children to be in. And so we create these little pockets in our communities where we say, there you go and play in there. It's safe. We can watch you. These are the equipments you can play on. This is what you can do. You can swing. You can jump up and down. But actually, really, what would be better, I think, is if we just were able to create environments that were safe, that didn't have danger of toxic waste or any risks for children in a certain environment, and let them be free. And actually, as an adult, I think it's more important to be a bit more invisible than hands-on constantly. That we can learn a lot by just seeing children play in the woods, or adventure playground spaces. There's a lovely playground in Kew Gardens. It's pretty incredible. There's a lot of work that Duncan Grove do these beautiful structures. But yeah, I think it's a little bit more organic and allowing that freedom of expression for children, which is so important. And I think it's really difficult to find that in a really tight and urban environment, sort of commercialized urban environment. So, but it's not to say there are not opportunities. There are so many little in-between spaces that could be afforded for young people to explore. I guess we just need to look at the commercial side of the city in a slightly different way. And can we repurpose commercial space in a more positive educational way? And I guess we've been looking at that a little bit and exploring it and researching it for the work we're doing with nurseries, and even recently discussed this with London Sport, converting ex-retail units and the like for more sort of community positive projects. But
what do you think it's the impact on the built environment as well as on the children, the work you're doing in nurseries and, in the education project?
I guess this is where we can start to think a little bit more about the educational system and what we see is important for children to learn and what actually they maybe need. And where this gets a bit deeper into, what the children as a group in society and, letting them be heard and experience the world in a way that actually is a bit more organic from such an early age. I think it's really important to allow that freedom from sort of toddler age all the way through to teenager and not to sort of pre-describe what should be done educationally and in the built environment. And then I guess as an impact on how children use space that we've been designing. It's interesting. I suppose we've done a lot of nurseries now. We've worked to a lot of early years settings, and one of the key things we try and bring in is this idea of natural materials, sustainability, and a bit of a deeper connection to the natural world. Whether that's just a simple intervention and being able to see outside, trying to create more external space, or whether it's to do with the actual materiality of the internal space and how they're sort of learning about what they touch and feel and see on a daily basis. That's kind of one of our key approaches. Often in London, you find that most of these spaces have limited gardens. It's very rare to have an expansive play area in a nursery in the city. So you've got to be a bit more creative about what can be used. We've done pub conversions that sadly aren't pubs anymore, because that's another thing that's happened quite recently. But we create a soft play in nurseries where they haven't got as much external play, so they've still got space to explore and be themselves and let out energy, even in tight environments. But I feel that the nursery setting is quite interesting, as it often sits within a wider commercial space in the city. We've done projects that are in the base of a 15-story tower that's sort of near the Thames in Royal Wharf. And it's such an important element to society itself. It's so needed. There's such a high demand for it as well, that we're not going to get away from it. It's something that needs to be provided more and more. There's a new initiative recently come out from the government that offers more funded places for children from 18 months old, which is really great. But the problem is that often most nurseries can't afford or can't take on more children that they have the capacity. So the more and more we think about it, the more all these nursery spaces are intertwined in our environment, in the built spaces that we occupy and use. And something that we've tried to do in some of these commercial spaces is make them more accessible, make them more open to areas adjacent to them. So although there's an element of safeguarding and making sure that people can't always see inside nurseries, I think it's really important that these aren't hidden away. They're not tucked into the back of commercial areas, that actually they're open to the environment near them, that children can see out, see nature, see what's around them, and be part of that urban space. So I think that's how nurseries sort of affect the built environment. And I think how we could maybe improve on that is to think a bit more about what a child of a certain age experiences, even from their journey towards school, towards nursery. How do we get there? How do we access it? How do we travel to these spaces? And what do they do on their way, on their journey? What's the wayfinding? And that goes all the way from a 1 and 2 year old all the way up to 16, 17, 18 and into higher education. So I think it's a really important focal point of the built environment and what we can offer to society. As we touched on earlier, it's critical to give younger people a voice to be heard and not just design what we think is necessary for them. And I think there's a really nice shift towards that. You see a bit more in award recognition recently, in the Sterling Prize, and educational projects getting recognised properly for larger sort of architectural merit. And I think that's a really nice shift. And it feels like it's moving in
terms of nursery design. How are we in terms of the country in working in similarly in the way you do? What inspires you and what motivates you to do this work?
As a country, I think in the UK, we have one of the highest childcare costs in Europe. I think we're the third highest in Europe, maybe if not the world. And it's something we've written about and talked about quite a lot. It's quite difficult for parents to juggle the idea of childcare versus going back to work, say post paternity, maternity leave, because childcare costs are so high. And this is probably touching a bit more into sort of political discourse and government financing for nurseries, but it is a really important thing to consider, because it's such a critical age. It's not really child care. It is actually education at early years. And it's really important to understand that. It's not a place where children are just looked after for 8-9 hours a day. It's a fundamental part of your early preschool education, and children learn those really key skills. So as a country, I personally think we should be doing more for recognising the importance of nurseries and the importance of nursery teachers and settings and what they do for the thousands and thousands of children that go there every day and start their early education. So I actually think there's probably an argument to discuss a sort of deeper retrofit strategy for a nationwide approach to old commercial disused buildings for conversion into nursery spaces, considering there's such high demand. Why can you zero rate a new build residential project, but you can't retrofit a nursery and zero rate the VAT on that? Would be something just to consider. Where's the benefit in that to the community? What if we want to look at retrofit housing, which is great, it's had a real push forward in the last sort of 3, 4, 5 years. I think we should be looking at this from a commercial standpoint as well, and understanding that educational buildings aren't just schools, universities and sort of higher education. It is an early years nursery sector as well. And if you can offer a financial incentive and an additional level of funding, which is coming in from September next year, but we need the extra space. So yeah, I think as a country we need to sort of probably think about this a little bit wider rather than sort of on a smaller scale. What inspires? Yes, I think our inspiration comes from the way children use the space and seeing completed projects that we've done working as successful nurseries, and seeing children enjoying and bringing joy into a space. There's nothing more inspiring than a happy child playing in a space that you've been involved in and designed. Like I said earlier, it's not just us. There's a massive team involved in the delivery of these projects. But certainly the opportunity it creates and the benefit and potential it offers to young people is a huge inspiration for us as a practice.
In your opinion, how important is play in children's life, and how much are we taking that into consideration as a society?
I think it's critical. I think it's something that can't be underestimated. There's a great quote in the video I referred to earlier, Assemble's video, Vince Biennale, Voice of the Children. Play simply prepares you for future unpredictability, and play is something that children do without fear of failure. And they're told what to do so much in school, how we expect them to behave, what we expect them to become. When they are able to play, it's a complete, free and joyous expression of their inner self. And I think it's really critical. I think actually something that if we don't focus on this, I'm not sure we understand yet what the consequences could be in, for the future generations, 10, 15, 50 years time. So yeah, I think it's really fundamental. I think we've always understood the benefit of play, but when you see a child play, if you look in an adventure playground, it's such an interesting dynamic. They learn so many social skills in the way they're actually interacting with others, with people, with equipment, with their environment, and they learn how to take risks, and I think that's really important too. They learn how to fail, because then they learn how to pick themselves up and do it again, and what decisions to make the next time that don't result in failure. And often when we're in situations with children that are slightly less safe, near a road or even at school, you're telling them what to do and how not to fail, how to be safe, how to stay risk-free, whereas play lets a child explore those risks and that dynamic of being a young person, without that preconceived idea of the world and those dangers that us as adults constantly consider. So I think it's really critical, and yeah, we should be looking at it more as a society. Sure.
Is there a question I should have asked you that I haven't asked you, and what is that question?
I guess the architect's role in educational design, and it involves such a wider team. I think you touched on this quite interestingly about the research. What we're informed by, what kind of precedents we take in our work, and what inspires us. I think it's really important. The wider team are involved in all projects, really, in all kind of sectors. It's so vast, and I think what kind of inspires me as an architect is you're not the only person involved in this. There's a huge chain of people. There's a huge chain of stakeholders involved in a project. And the nice thing with education is that who you're designing for, it's a wide network of individuals, such a diverse community of individuals who could use but spaces in urban areas in a completely unique way. So there's no real right answer to how architects should design for education. I think it's just really important that we listen. And that's probably my biggest takeaway from thinking about how we work with younger people in nurseries and even sort of older educational settings. It's just being there and listening and allowing everyone to have a voice, rather than sort of trying to put too much into a space. So again, what you take out and what you leave for open expression and freedom is more important than what you put in. So I think that's really, really key, and maybe something we should explore more. From a policy-making point of view and a wider urban planning, again, that's the same sort of thing. How do we create these more diverse and free spaces for children in a city that's so commercialized? Do we need to create spaces for it, or do we actually need to just leave spaces in between that can be occupied in a way that sort of naturally works? But for younger people, we just need safer spaces in between that aren't specifically used in a certain commercial way that has to be paid for, or has to be used at a certain time of day. So yeah, it's an intriguing thought. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much to my guest today, to all the listeners, and please subscribe to Architecture for Kids podcast and leave your rating and a review. Recommend us to your friends and family. And to find out more about it, visit our websites, antoniocaplan-portfolio.co.uk, buildingcentre.co.uk, thorntoneducationtrust.org, cardiff.ac.uk, and follow us on Instagram, Arch4Kids Twitter, @Kaplan, LinkedIn, @Kaplan, CAPELAO. And please join me again next week for another episode of Architecture for Kids podcast, brought to you in collaboration with the Built Environment Trust, the Thornton Education Trust, and the Welsh School of Architecture, Cardiff University.